Hi, I'm procrastinating. Welcome back to the Destroyermen podcast, where we're going to go over the third book in the Destroyermen series, Maelstrom. First, before we get into that, I need to go over, I haven't uploaded in a couple weeks, because it was Christmas, and then it was my birthday, and then I got sick. It's a cold. Anyway, but I did get new microphones set up, so hopefully the audio quality is a little better for this. So anyway, let's go into it. We start off somewhere we haven't been before. Somewhere in the Pacific or Eastern Ocean, there's a ship. And on this ship, there's a little girl, and she has a dream about the ship is being torn apart by one of the great fish that swim in the ocean. When she wakes up, it's not a dream, but it's reality. Her master is thrown over the side by the monster, and another man, she only knows as O'Casey, appears. He gets a load of muskets and they get into a boat. We don't know who this girl is, but she's important later in the story. But back to Balkpon. They decide that they need to send Captain Reddy to the Philippine lands in Manila to go secure aid. They will also send a rescue mission to Bombado to rescue more of the refugees that are left there from the invasion. Finally, they need to send the remaining ships that have not been destroyed by the Grick to scout for Amagi, which they think is about 3 months from being ready, so therefore 3 months from the invasion of Balkpon. Walker sets off about 2 weeks later. It's a long voyage, and they stop on the way at an island named Tarakan, off the coast of Borneo, where they set up an oil drill to build a reserve supply of crude. They then head north across the Sulu Sea, where they encounter several mountain fish, one of which they kill. Once they make it to Manila, they meet with the High Chief. Now, San Kaksha was new. Kiji and Adar were on the trip, and they had not met the chief, as it had been over 2 years since they last visited. The last chief that they knew, Maka Kaksha, had not had any children. No female children. They found out San Kaksha was a girl, and they were a little confused for like 3 pages. And anyway, so they get going, and for the next 5 days, they don't see San Kaksha at all, and they're mainly just arguing with the High Sky Priest, Mexnok. Mexnok is old, and he doesn't want change. Might sound familiar. Anyway, on the 5th day, Captain Reddy and Silva, they say, if we don't get our aid secured, then we need to leave, because we've got like 2 months now until the town gets destroyed. And there's also rumors of an iron fish in the archipelago, which they think is a submarine, hopefully American, of course, but either way, it'd be probably pretty helpful if they could find it. So anyway, they finally meet with San Kaksha, who then says, okay, we're gonna let you have troops. No, get on your way. And so they spend about 2 weeks going south to the archipelago looking for the sub. They're about to give up, and they decide, let's go to Taloaud Island, which is in an archipelago about, I think it's like north of Celebes and south of the Philippines. And they get there, and they go around. It's a volcanic island, and they can hear lots of animals. And in the morning, they dock in a lagoon. They notice in the lagoon there's the submarine. It's just right there. It's up on the beach about 30 feet from shore. So they say, great, okay. Then they go ashore and get on the submarine. And they think, okay, do we want to look at the engines to see if we can get this thing off the island? Or do we go for the torpedoes? They decided to look for torpedoes, but sadly there's none there. But they can't stand underneath because it's very hot, so they just need to get out of there. So, next they think, okay, well, is there any people left? But they see some human footprints, but also what looks like Grick footprints, which is concerning. So they head along the trail, and they make it. They see a clearing, and Silva, he's in the front, he sees a Grick, so he shoots it, of course. What he notices, a little girl runs at him and jumps on him and beats him with a wooden club. Eventually they figure out that the Grick was not a Grick, it was just looked like a Grick, and it was differently colored. It was named Lawrence. So, the little girl was named Rebecca. Sorry about that. So anyway, they go on, they follow the path some more, and they find a larger clearing with what looks like some crude breastworks. Then there's a man, and that has one arm, and another man. And then weirdly, they both have sawn-off muskets, of all things. And about a dozen children and 4 women. And a few other guys. And they're confused, and they ask, "Who are you?" And one of them, Silva recognizes it's Billy Flynn, who was the chief of the boat S-19. He knew him from the Philippines in the old war. And he explains that S-19 was moving some children of like diplomats, generals, politicians out of Surabaya, away from the Japanese. And the 4 women were the nannies. One of them was a nun, and Sister Audrey. And then the rest of the people were the surviving crew of the boat. And he explains that on the way out, they heard Walker and Mahan's battle, and then they got depth charged by one of the destroyers, which they think was Shinya's old destroyer, in fact. And they had gotten damaged, and one of the batteries leaked, which, if you didn't know, lithium-ion batteries and water are not a great mix. So there's gas, and then some people died because they had to shut it off. And then eventually they made it through the storm, and then they ended up here. And they'd gone around trying to find somewhere with people that they knew. And that was like the last few months, and then about 10 months ago, they ended up on to Loud. So they take the kids and most of the crew back, put them on Walker. They put the rest of them on another ship that came around the island later. And they took them to Balkpon. And then Walker decides, okay, we've got to get back to Balkpon. Now we've got like a month and a half. And they make, on Tarakan, they left Chief Gray. And there was another ship that was led by Lieutenant Clark, and he had said that there was some Grick ships, 3 Grick ships, that appeared on the horizon, and they fought a battle against them where Lieutenant Clark's ship was destroyed and he was killed. And then weirdly, some 3 or 4 like paddle wheel steamers appeared a couple hours later. And Shinya, who was also there, went out to meet them. And they were British. And the leader of them was Commodore Jenks. So they went ashore on Tarakan, and Gray didn't like Commodore Jenks. Said that he seemed pretty arrogant. And they said that they were looking for a princess of their empire, the Empire of the New Britain Isles. And then Walker shows up a few days later, and they don't know if the battle is going to be helped by Jenks and his squadron or not, but they're not sure whose side they're even on after that first interaction. So they head into Balkpan. They had lost radio contact while they were in Manila. Unbeknownst to them, they had actually been, the last Japanese scout plane had bombed them, and a couple dozen people had died, and the radio had been destroyed, almost along with the plane. So eventually they get a radio working, like they build their own, a crystal receiver. And so they finally hear from Balkpan when they're about a couple hours away. And there's another transmission that they get before that, which is supposedly from Colonel Kaufman, Captain Kaufman, who they had thought had been eaten by the Grick about 6 months ago. So they're pretty confused. And he says that he's been on a Magi, and there's an officer named Okada, and he has been helping him, and he helped him get to a radio transmitter on a Magi. And he transmitted a message that the fleet was ready to sail and a Magi would be along in about a day. Which meant that they probably had somewhere around 3 or 4 days before the Grit got there. So then they're like, oh, this is a problem. And so they got depth charges, and they made them into mines. And then the Greek fleet, 400 ships, and a Magi. Some of the Greek ships had cannons, as Captain Greg Garrett's Donaghy had found out when they went to rescue the refugees from Bimbato. And the battle breaks loose. The Fort Atkinson at the mouth of Balkpan Bay, which is commanded by Perry Brister and Rollock. It almost gets overrun, and they pretend, once the Magi comes in, they pretend that they had been destroyed. They just don't shoot any guns so that Magi stops focusing on them. And then around the breastworks around the city, there's Lieutenant Shinya's in control, and the wall holds mostly. There's a couple breakthroughs that are eventually put back. However, the battle at sea doesn't go as well. The 3 friendly frigates, Donaghy, Tolson, and Khazra are 2 of them are destroyed, and one of them, Donaghy, barely survives. And then Chak's Marines are on Walker, and they are the first to spot that a Magi is entering. And the plan was that Mahan was hiding, disguised as Walker. And Mahan would go out, once Magi was focused on Walker, with the 1 remaining torpedo that they had, and hit a Magi, and hopefully she would sink. It didn't quite go that way. Walker's just getting pasted in the harbor, and Mahan goes out. And so the torpedo, it just hits a Grick ship, which is not a good thing, because he just wasted the only torpedo, and now the Magi knows about it, but they still focus on Walker. And just as Walker is pretty much destroyed, Mahan, Chak's chief, Kiji's daughter, her mate, he's on, and he's crazy. He got captured by the Grick, and he survived. but he's insane, so he puts all the depth charges Mahan has left in the front of the boat, and then rams it into Amagi, and like half the crew dies. The captain and a couple officers get on the boat, and they go back to Balkpon. Then Amagi starts sinking, but not fast enough. But then there's one mine. It had the detonator from another torpedo that hadn't worked. Took the detonator out, put it on like half a dozen mines, and then Amagi went over it. And it only worked on Amagi because it was magnetic, and destroyed it. Just a huge hole, and it broke in half and sunk. And after that, pretty much the battle was won, and they decide that Walker barely makes it back to the bay, and pretty much just sinks. And so they're deciding, should we bring Walker back, or should we just scavenge the metal? And they're scavenging Amagi's metal as well. And they decide it's time. They press the war to the Grick, take back Ariel, and then keep going. Hopefully all the way to Africa. But for now, that's where the story lies. Thank you and goodbye.